Now we're going to do some dart manipulation. So the block that we have that you'll be using, this is a half scale version of it in paper, and these are in the studio for you to use. We also have cardboard versions for you to use in the studio. But the good thing about using one of these is that you can draw your design lines on it and use it as a reference. So if there's maybe something that goes wrong further down the line, you can always come back to your original sort of master plan of your bodice shaping to see what might have gone wrong. So this is a centre front on the fold with our waist dart and our side dart, and in toile version we've got our little cute half scale here. So we have our side dart just going down slightly. This is quite, you have the aesthetic of darts, and so this dart here goes down a little bit. Rather than having it can look a bit strange if the dart's going straight across. So if you have it going up towards the bust, it makes the bust appear a little bit perkier, I suppose. And you have our waist dart here. So to get this sort of fit, we have the two darts, and like I said in the other video, the more darts you have, or the more places you have the fitting in your garment, the smoother the look is going to be over the bust. But there are also instances where you want as little dart, as lesser darts as possible. So you might have some sort of embroidery decoration or an applique, or you might just have a really big print that you don't want to interrupt with too many darts. So we're going to show you a couple of ways of manipulating this dart. So rather than having two darts here, we're just going to, in our first instance, we're going to put the side dart down into the waist here, and we're going to end up with the bodice that looks like this. So we still get the fit over the bust, but we only have the one dart, so we don't have another line coming through into the side seam here. And we'll also show you how to move the waist dart into this one as well, so you just have the single side dart. So to get started, we just go back to our block, and we have to think about what's going to stay the same. So the centre front stays the same, the neckline, the shoulder, the armhole, all of that stays the same. And then we're going to move this dart down into here. So when we start drawing it out, we're just going to start at the dart, and we're going to draw in all of those places that aren't going to change. The worst thing you can do when you start dart manipulation is, and I see it again and again, where they start their pattern making by drawing around the whole block, and then they try and move the darts, but because so if you had this line drawn here and then you move the dart around and added another line onto it, you end up with two lines, and sometimes it can be confusing as to which ones join up with which. So you can see here, I've just outlined the bit that doesn't move, and now we can work with the darts and moving the darts. So when you're moving darts around the bodice, around your pattern, you always move your front darts from the bust point. This is the idea that these darts come back away from the bust, is so that you can get a bit more of a variation in the bust point, because you might have a wider set bust or a bust set closer together. It could be a little lower or a little higher on the body than the like this basic block. So the idea is, by taking the end of the dart back away from our bust point here, we're making the fit a little bit more flexible for more different body types. So, but when we move it, we always have to move it from the actual bust point. So we've got our dart here. So this dart here is going down to here. So this one's going to get bigger and this one's going to disappear. So if we pivot from the bust point, you'll see here, just move this around, and we're going to close the dart here. So this bit here has stayed the same, this bit here has disappeared, and then we have to draw in the rest of our bodice, and we'll take this all the way down to here, and I'll just put in my bust point there, and you can see here we have the bust point and we have our new dart position here. Also do maybe is just continue that down a little bit. And so even though we've pivoted from the bust point, when we create our new dart, we then have to take it back as we did here. So it'll be 1.5 centimeters on half scale, 3 centimeters in full scale. And to get that new point there, we just have to divide the dart in half. So this dart is 4.5, so that's 2.25 there. So there's the center of the dart. And we'll draw a line up to the bust point, and then we'll come back away from the bust point 1.5 centimeters or 3 centimeters in full scale. And then we draw in the dart arms on either side. Okay. So, and then just to indicate the end of the dart here, we need to put in a drill hole, and we'll sew 1 centimeter past the drill hole in full scale, or 5 millimeters on this half scale. So we'll just put that drill hole in position, a little cross with a circle around it. And that way when we sew the dart together, we'll sew past the drill hole, and so you won't see the drill hole. So never put the drill hole right at the end of the dart, because then when you sew, you can still see the hole in the end of the dart through in the fabric. So we just need to neaten up our side seam a little bit, so straighten that off. It's just a tiny little variation there. And then we also need to think about this fold back here. So you can see on this one here, our darts have been pressed towards the center front, and you can see that they have this peak here. And the idea of that is once you press the dart, that this peak folds back and lines up with the waist of your on your front bodice, and that when you stitch this, when you stitch on the skirt or finish this bottom edge here, that all of these will lay together. Because if you just came straight across from here to here, this would be that much shorter, and then it would and then you stitch it there, and you still have this little bit flapping around, so that the dart return or the back of the dart should go all the way down to the raw edge. So
and that's called truing, isn't it, Mum?
Truing the dart.
Truing the dart.
Truing the dart.
Truing the dart.
So the way that we can do that is we fold, and usually I don't like to fold darts, but it really is one of those situations where you just have to bite the bullet and fold the dart. So you fold it along the center front line there, and then flatten it out again, and then you'll see here, if I put my finger on the end of the dart, I can actually pull this around. Oop. Okay. Pull this around, and you can see it's sort of like made an indentation. And so 2 things you can do here. One, you would, and this would be once you've added a seam allowance as well, would be to cut along this line, cut along the line, and then it'll cut down through the dart, the back of the dart, and then it'll give you your shape here. The other way you can do it is just to get your tracing wheel. Trace this through here, and you can see here when I draw that in, so that's what our dart is going to look like. So once that's cut and folded back, it'll be and sewn like this, and then it'll come down right in line with the raw edge there. And so now you would add seam allowances. So your center front would still be on the fold. And you would add seam allowance onto the shoulder. And this is really, this is really just showing you how to move the dart. So there's no other actual design in this garment. So, you'd need a seam allowance for the neck, seam allowance for the armhole, side seams, and the waist seam. That's just your center front that's on the fold there. So you get, like the whole piece as shown here. Okay, so we've done that one. So now we're going to go back the other way. And, excuse me, I'll just have a drink of water.
And Mark, there's lots of things you can do with that dart value. Hey, you don't necessarily have to sew that in. That could be gathered in under the bust.
Yeah, so in another one of our of these, we can I'll show you one where I've used gather to so that the dart isn't actually sewn in, but it's changed into gather, so you get still a similar fit, just without that sewn line there. So this time we're going to combine our side dart and our waist dart. We're going to put the waist dart up into the side seam here, into our side dart, to make that one big dart. So again, it's just this section here that we're actually manipulating. So we start at the bottom and then draw only around the section which is going to stay the same. So from our top dart arm here on the side to our center front dart arm here, and like that's what's going to change. So I've only drawn that much there. Something I didn't do on my other one as well is just to make sure that I actually transfer my armhole notch onto my armhole. Very important. Okay, so now we want this dart to go into this dart here, so we have to close this dart. And like I said before, we're going to pivot from the bust point, not from the end of the dart, and we're going to pivot until our dart swings around at the bottom here, and then that closes up, so that we've got rid of that dart and we've now moved the excess fabric over here. Okay, so we just mark out the bottom of the dart, and we'll still need to work out, the shape of our dart here. And I just put this back on, so I need to have my bust point. So I'll just write bust point there. And I need to measure, so halfway, and then a line back, a construction line from the bust point. We need to come back 1.5 centimeters or 3 centimeters in full scale. And then from these points here, or this point here, going to mark in our new dart, and then put our drill hole 0.5 centimeter back from the end of the dart, or 1 centimeter in full scale. And now we have to get this return. Now one way of doing it, because this is the waist shape on our original one here was curved, which did make it a little bit trickier, but on the side seam, because we've got 2 straight lines, we've got 2 options. One is to actually fold the dart along the arm and move it up, and then draw our new line in. Or else another option on our side seam here is to extend that dart down. We can only do this though because this is a straight line, and then back in again, and that'll give us our bust shaping, sort of the dart value shaping there. Okay, and so then so we keep our bust point as our reference point in case we want to use this again and move the dart somewhere else. We've still got that as a reference point, but important, if you write on it straight away,
Really,
centre front
those
fold.
darts can move anywhere around bus point, can't they? They can go anywhere.
Exactly. Yep. So we could, we could even have like the position that we wanted to put it in, like it might have actually been a squiggly line up into the armhole, because this dart arm doesn't have to be a straight line. It can be a curved line as well. But just remember, the more wobbly you make lines, the harder they are to sew. And the idea of pivoting this bust dart in such a basic way is sort of just so that we still get the same fit. We just make a much less obvious, dart position. And the reason I've written to this centre front fold on here, I didn't mention it before, is because sometimes you get a bit carried away with the seam allowances, and it can be really tempting as you're learning to add a seam allowance all the way around the piece. And of course you don't want a seam allowance down the centre front here because your centre front is on the fold. Actually, this one here. Your centre front is on the fold. So if you actually added a seam allowance down the front here and then cut it on the fold, you would have an extra 2 centimetres width down, down the centre front of your garment. Okay, so that's basic dart manipulation for your front bodice.